Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this special edition of Uncut History. Oh, no, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. There we are. No, I'm not shunning you. I'm not putting you in the dark room. Not doing that. We're here. We're live. It's the 37th installment of Uncut History, and our guest tonight is History Savior 1941. Welcome to the channel. I finally got you tacked onto the fly paper I've been chasing around you with for several months. You finally got stuck, and you're here with me for the next hour.
Yeah, yeah, sounds like a good time.
Or yes, I made that sound very horrifying, which was not what I intended, but we do that. We do that.
Hey, there's
So
scarier things, man.
there are scarier stuff out there. So what we're gonna do tonight, guys? I'm gonna see if I can adjust this slightly. Do I like this? Do I like this? I think we'll do this right now. What we're gonna do tonight? Tonight's guest I mentioned is History Savior 1941, who is the technical term history tuber. I kind of use that in the description. For now, we're going to call you a history tuber and a Second World War living historian. You've been on YouTube and several other platforms for a few years now, going out, recording historical locations that you're able to reach to, telling their stories. And yeah, we're just going to talk about how you got into it. So I guess first and foremost, what type of history bug bit you all them years ago?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. So I'm gonna make it short because there's a very long route to that. But I guess it started when I was like in the fourth grade. We had a course here called Alabama History in Schools, and then my dad was also in the history a little bit. So I was introduced to the reenacting world at a very early age, and I just became infatuated with the American Civil War. That's where it really started. Reading about the Battle of Gettysburg and Antietam, and then some of the battlefields in the area where I live, the Battle of Mobile Bay, and it took off from there. But then that grew into World War II history, and man, World War II history and the Civil War kind of runs neck and neck as far as my interests go. But over the course of time, I just started getting more interested in French and Indian War history, War of 1812, the Creek Indian Wars, Spanish American War, World War One. So it just kind of grew into an all military history background with a specialization in Civil War and World War Two. So I joined the Marine Corps out of high school, got in a bad car wreck while I was in the delayed entry program. And I mean, that was a bummer, dude. I look forward to going in the Marines, you know, maybe becoming a military historian inside of the military itself. And, got, they come into my hospital room, the recruiter did, and said, hey, sorry, you've been in for 8 months, training 7 days a week. And this happened a day before I went to Paris Holland. I got in a car wreck. And he was like, well, this is it. We can't take you anymore. So I went to college, and here I am now. So it's uh, it's been a ride, but it's been a fun one.
So you enlisted in the Marine Corps, but due to medical reasons, could not continue. So you went to college, got a degree. So what were you doing before you kind of? How did you keep your interest in history going? Like, were you still like? Did you as soon as you got out of your attempt to be in the Corps? Did you? I guess how I want to word this. Did you start seeking out living history? Was it a little while before you really started considering it? Was there like a gap in time where history was just more in the periphery of things?
Growing up, I grew up around living history events. My dad was into it a little bit, and as I started getting interested in the Civil War, I remember he took me to a reenactment called the Battle of Selma in Selma, Alabama.
Okay, I've heard of
And
it.
that kind of, I was like 12 or 13 years old, and that got me interested in reenacting itself. So I actually started reenacting when I was like 13, 14, somewhere in that ballpark. And I kept reenacting all, Civil War stuff until I was in college. And then I quit because school was taking up a lot of my time. Playing hockey, doing that kind of stuff was taking up a lot of my time. So I started back, but I had gotten that's really when World War II reenacting was taking off while I was in college, and it started getting a lot bigger, and I got into it, and I have never looked back since I started World War II reenacting in college, and I'm where I'm at now with it, and it's it's honestly the funnest thing I have ever did. It's a passion, and it's a really cool hobby. It is because you're constantly learning, and it forces you to learn. So doing the living history stuff it has perks. You learn, you're able to teach people about the war and what those guys went through, and those even the women who were the wax what they went through. I mean, it's it's a rewarding hobby, honestly.
So you get into World War II reenacting. Is there a particular unit that you threw yourself into, a certain group of a unit that you just basically this is who I am going to represent, or is it several units? Do you just kind of do a generic portrayal of a GI? What's your focus when you do the living history?
Well, when I first started, I joined a unit that was portraying the Night SS Hohenstaufen. So I actually started doing German, and for anybody that does World War II reenacting, German reenacting is not cheap at all, and it's a lot of research. I mean, the German army has so many different uniforms, and you know, I was interested in German World War II reenacting for a couple of reasons. One was the weaponry. Two was, I thought the uniforms looked cool, and the kit that they use was pretty neat, and the history was also neat. But my love was with American GI reenacting. I just didn't have many friends who actually did it. So a few years back, I got out of German World War II reenacting. I still do it from time to time, but I started throwing myself into USGI reenacting, basically the First Division, um, First Infantry, Regiment, or First Infantry Division rather, and that's what I do now. They're otherwise known as the Big Red One, but you have this problem in World War II reenacting where you had movies that really got everyone interested in doing the hobby in the first place. And it was no different for me. Of course, I watched Saving Private Ryan growing up, and that's really one of the main things that got me interested in World War II. And it's the same for most reenactors. And then you have Band of Brothers, and a problem you run into is you
It's
have
over
so
here
many.
somewhere, I promise. It's over there on the shelf somewhere.
Well, that's a problem. I mean, they're great movies, but the problem is now is that you have so much of an influx of paratroopers in the reenacting
I have heard about
field.
this.
Oh yeah, and it's definitely true. Everyone wants to do Easy Company. They want to do Easy Company. They want to do paratroopers. So I didn't want to do that. I love the movie, and nothing against the guys who are elite, but what about these other guys? And the Big Red One was one of the most important divisions during World War II. And that is really where my interest lie was with those guys on D-Day and they're landing on Omaha Beach. And not only that, but the course they took after the landings on D-Day through France and into Germany eventually. And that's what I was interested in. So that's what me and a group of friends started doing. We now have a unit that has built up over the last year. I'm able to do this with my best friend, out in reenacting and outside of reenacting. We talk every day, so we have that common denominator there that keeps us talking constantly. So reenacting has become more than just a hobby, but it's also become an everyday thing. And that's the beauty of being able to do the hobby because you're interested in history and invested in it so much is that you make these friends throughout the hobby that become, your friends outside of the hobby itself. And we have a lot of fun with it. We portray The Big Red One, for instance, we got an event coming up. We're actually doing the 317th Infantry Regiment because that is where a friend of mine is like my grandfather. He was a first lieutenant with the 317th, and we're portraying his unit for a Battle of the Bulge event coming up in January. So we're able to pay homage to him, and he just turned 101 years old.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah, he's not going to be around much longer with us. That's just that's the fact of the matter. And to be able to sit down with these guys and hear their stories firsthand, and then actually go out and try to get a taste of what they're telling you for yourself, without, of course, the bullets flying over your head and freezing your toes off. Yeah, it gives you a sense of what they went through. I mean, you put on that uniform, you lug around that equipment, that firearm all day. Sometimes in rain, sometimes in the freezing cold weather, sleeping in a hole. You're able to get a sense of that kind of perspective of what they went through. And he talked about this, and it's awesome to be able to go out and preserve those memories, and kind of feel a little bit of it for yourself, so you get a better understanding of what you're trying to teach people.
We first I want to comment quickly because we just had two people jump in the chat. Good evening, Wrangler and Project Pass. Good evening. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
Hey, James is good.
So you mentioned about uh, uh, one of the members of your group, their relative was in the Second World War, and it's crazy to think that we're gonna be the last. I guess you want to say the last adults, really, the young adults in the United States. And yes, I know you're probably going, oh, don't say young adult. I mean, people that had direct contact with World War II veterans after us, like the next generation. For example, I'm pretty young. I'm Generation Z, but the next generation after me, Generation Alpha, they're not going to have that connection. They're not going to be able to say, like, oh, I knew a World War II veteran or I met one. My local historical society, one of the key board members is a veteran of the Second World War, is still active with our historical society. He is not very fond of, not as he doesn't like talking about his time in the service, but he very plays it low tier. Like he went on a tour of Belgium just last year, and they visited the Bastogne Museum. And they weren't originally going to visit because they were going to be there like an hour after the museum closed. But the moment they realized that he was a Second World War veteran, they kept that thing open for like 3 hours after closing time just so he can come and see. And he signed apparently this large sign of Bastogne that all veterans that have come to the museum to sign, they insist on sign it. And the thing was, he felt really awkward doing it because he didn't serve. He served in the Pacific theater. He didn't serve in the European theater. He's like, I didn't do any of this. I was serving on a minesweeper out in the Pacific. They treat him as a hero regardless. It was crazy. So, but after this is over, all these connections are going to go away. And it's a little bit scary on where we're going to be because we were so used to for so many years the Second World War. Everybody just understood it to a certain degree. Everybody just understood the severity of it. They understood the significance of it. But once that generation's removed, what's going to happen? It's very scary thought. What's going to happen once all the people who survived that are going to be gone?
Sure. I mean, you got to look at it. These guys are in their 90s. Mr. Jones, for instance, is 101 years old. He was a first lieutenant. I know no other World War II veterans alive who was a first lieutenant. And not only that, I mean, his stories are are not a normal World War II veteran in the stories they would have. He come in at the tail end of the Battle of the Bulge, and he was one of the men who actually, when everyone hears about the treasures that Hitler stole during World War II, they've seen the movie Monuments Men. Well, what they don't realize, the Monuments Men were real. This isn't a fictional story. Well, his connection that will be lost if his story isn't preserved is a very crucial one to World War II because he was tasked with a secret operation of standing guard at a castle just outside of Luxembourg, Germany. as the monuments men were uncovering the treasures inside of this castle. So he was tasked with actually standing the guard and not letting anybody in. He said he couldn't let anybody in, couldn't let anybody out, and he actually saw the diamond as it come out. He saw the paintings. He knew the monuments man. He worked hand in hand with them. And there's not another veteran alive who did that. He's the last. And as these veterans like him perish, their stories die with them if they're not preserved and their memories are forgotten. And it is, you're right, it is extremely scary because, I mean, when you think about it, and I have been trying to emphasize this time and time again, at 5 years' time, there will be no more World War II veterans
No.
left. And places like Omaha Beach, places like the Ardennes, places like, the Philippines and Iwo Jima, the stories that are there are going to remain there if they're not protected. And, you know, fortunately, there is a big, push from different people like the author of the book, The Rifle, JD's from History of the Ground's been doing some stuff with him. Extraordinary veteran himself, combat veteran, who's now taking this journey to help preserve those stories of World War II combat veterans. And then you have, different organizations. Gary Sinise's organization, that's doing big things to help protect these legacies. But is that going to be enough? And it really is scary.
I think one of the ways that I think we both think we're trying to contribute to it, that a small way we could contribute to the preservation of Second World War stories and any history story for that matter as generations die out. We kind of decide to go out and record the stories ourselves, be it sometime not us ourselves, but some people interview the people who survived it, but in more cases it's us going to where these historical events occur or have a connection to it. And that's going to lead me into question asking, how did you decide you're going to start doing a YouTube channel to document some of the living history events that you do, as well as these historical locations? How did that start?
I started this YouTube channel about 5 years ago or so now, I believe. I'm up, I just cleared my 300th episode on my channel. And when I first started, I was not doing any of that. I was doing actually military rations. That was what I wanted to do, but I was trying to figure out, how to make YouTube videos. I did film production stuff. I still do it now in my everyday life outside of YouTube. I'm a cinematographer. That's what I do. But YouTube is a completely different animal. And I started out doing military rations because it was something that interests me and I thought it would interest other people. And quite frankly, I got tired of paying $100 for a ration to open up, take two bites of it, throw it in the trash can. And it just got boring to me. And that's not the direction I wanted to go. It was just an opening door to getting into this. But the problem is my interests are so out there. I have so many things I'm interested in, so many things I believe people can take away from a history YouTube channel. Of course, you've got JD and James from Project Pass, who's doing some of the most awesome history travel videos that you'll ever watch on YouTube. I can't do the job that they do because they are so good at what they do, and you know, I I put that out there, because I support those guys. Those are my favorite channels to watch. But it's what I wanted to do too. So I wanted to incorporate that in with the World War II reenacting because I thought people would get a good look. You know, it may draw in some people that wanted to do it for themselves. So I just decided, I'll do the travel stuff and reenacting and incorporate it all into one big channel for people to be able to come and watch some history content and some things they enjoy. So that is what I did, and I'll do different tutorials on reenacting, but the travel videos. I love traveling to historic sites, and it's cool to take people along with you and kind of give them a perspective of your visit, but also tell the history of the place and help preserve the history of these places and maybe convince them to go visit for themselves. And in doing that, I've been able to hook up with JD from the History Underground, James from the Project Past, all these YouTubers I looked up to. And now I'm able to call them friends. It's a really cool thing to be able to do that and be able to be a part of a community that's more like a family. People often think that YouTubers compete for views, they compete for subscribers. Honestly, and I don't want this to sound bad, I don't care about views. I don't care about subscribers. I just enjoy doing it. It's my passion. It's what I love doing, and I'm going to do it. And if people want to watch, I hope they can take away something from it. If one person learns anything by watching one of my videos, my job's complete. That's what I want to do. I want to just be a beacon for historical education and maybe get someone interested in history.
Now, something I've always thought of, and I agree with you completely. I don't think any history, at least in the history community on YouTube that I've interacted with, we're not trying to be competitive. No, I don't think any one of us have a competitive bone in our body, at least not when it comes to telling history. Now,
We're
when
all
we get to
nerds.
sports,
That's the simple gist of it.
now when it comes to sports, because you hockey player, yeah, that might be a different. There might be a different itch for competitiveness when it comes to sports. But when it comes to us telling the history, we all just want to get the history out. As long
Right.
as the history gets out, is what we matter. Now, I
Sure.
think one thing that every channel has, every creator has a certain core interest. Now, that core interest can be a zillion different things. And as I like to say on the channel, I live in the rabbit holes because it never fails that I keep starting new projects or going down new eras of history, and I don't know when to stop, which is not a bad thing necessarily, except for the space on this laptop. I'm sure you can share this where you just from one
Oh, yeah.
era to another. Oh, what's this? Oh, what's that?
Well,
But I
thanks
think
to JD and these World War One videos he's putting out, I've went down this World War
yes,
One rabbit hole now.
yes. No, I've been starting to go down that, especially with the video that I have coming out Saturday. I've been going down the rabbit hole of World War One equipment, which is something I've never even considered about my whole life because I've always been Civil War, French and Indian War. This is the
Yeah.
first time I'm going in and reading about the Martin bombers and all the different variants of them. But what I think is where we succeed in getting the word out, every channel you'll find they have their own niche topics that are just slightly different from every other channel. I feel every channel has certain topics that like, I've never seen that covered. I've never seen covered in that light. Now, for me, one of the big series that you did, I think was it this year or I apologize if my brain's fried. I can't remember years anymore. 2023, 1863. But let's go back a little bit down here, down the list. Not a little bit before Gettysburg. One of the first things I was really excited about is when you did the Vicksburg video about a half a year ago, the Vicksburg series,
Yeah.
because the American Battlefield Trust has done videos on Vicksburg, but I really hadn't seen a lot of vlogs the manner that you had done them. I was very excited, especially how in detail you went. What was it like getting to go out to Vicksburg? Did you go to Vicksburg before doing the series?
Actually, the answer to that question is no, I did not. I have been through Vicksburg a number of different times, but I've never had the time to actually stop and see the battlefield for myself. So the Vicksburg series was, and this is honest to God. I woke up one morning and I said, I'm going to Vicksburg tomorrow to shoot a series.
Nope, I've had that happen before.
and
Not to go to Vicksburg, but
and I actually told my wife that. I said, sweetheart, I'm going to Vicksburg tomorrow morning. And she just kind of looked at me and said, what? It got me. I live 4 hours away, so I'm not that far away. It's just a short drive for me. 4 hours is not a long drive for myself. Um, so I was like, I'll wake up at 3 a.m. and drive to Vicksburg and shoot a series. And I actually shot that entire series in one day, in the
wow.
course of 4.5 hours. And
Oh my
how
God.
I did that and kept the information straight, I would never know. But it was all thanks to the American Battlefield Trust and their references. They have excellent references. There is an excellent app on your phone. They have some of the coolest apps from the American Battlefield Trust. You can actually download on your iPhone. Not a lot of people know about these. And they have tours of Vicksburg, tours of Gettysburg, the first, second, and third days, and then tours of Antietam. So I downloaded the Vicksburg out. I started reading, doing a lot of reading, brushing up on Vicksburg for one whole day. And the next morning, I got up and went to Vicksburg and shot that series. And I'm sure I didn't get everything right because we're always learning. Um, None of us can get everything right. We don't know everything.
This
So
man, by the way, guys, this man right here got 6 episodes on Vicksburg out in one day. Well, he filmed it in one day.
yeah, I thought it was going to be one episode. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, if I make one episode of Pittsburgh, this thing's going to be 3 hours long. So I had to cut it down, and I just cut it down into portions. And what made it so bad is the Cario was actually closed for renovations when I went, which was a
Yeah.
bummer. That's one of the main things I wanted to see when I was there. But I luckily was able to see the battlefield, and I'm going to say this: you get my when you see my reaction in those episodes to seeing Vicksburg and the battlefield. That is my genuine reaction. I've never seen it before. You see me see it. And so that was the coolest part for me going back and looking at this series myself was I actually have my genuine reaction for seeing Vicksburg for the first time on camera. Because when I stood there, when you hit that main portion of the battlefield where all the works are, it is absolutely breathtaking. That camera can't do it justice. It's something you really have to see for yourself because you could clearly see all of the earthworks, and it was absolutely just mind blowing. Um, and I remember from that whole Vicksburg series, that was the one thing that really stuck out to me was how well preserved it actually was, and it's a great place to go. I urge everyone to go, and hopefully we'll go back and do a little bit more of Vicksburg in the future.
No, no, I want to see more. I really enjoyed your series. It's honestly one of the best that you've done on the channel, in my opinion. My favorite episode was the Illinois Monument video. I don't know why. There was something about getting to hear the whole story about what went into the thought process of that. And we're so well, here in Pennsylvania, of course, we have the Pennsylvania Memorial at Gettysburg. And I've always heard people jokingly say, the Pennsylvania Monument has nothing on the Illinois Monument. But I never really done any research. That was the first time I was exposed. I'm like, oh my, this is massive. This is on this. I've never seen a monument on a scale like this except at Gettysburg. And then when you really start digging into how important the Illinois regiments were to that engagement and why Illinois is so important to I'm pausing. Was it the Army? What was the name of the Union Army at that point? Was that the Army of the Tennessee or which one was it that laid siege to Vicksburg?
Oh, Army of East Tennessee, I believe, is right.
Okay.
And Joseph Johnson, Johnston's army. And you're right, man. I appreciate the kind words because honestly, I thought that was one of the worst series I've ever did.
No, no, it
But
was great.
I'm one of my own worst critics. I think everything I put out is absolutely horrendous. But I look back on some of my earlier videos. Please don't go watch the earlier Ration videos because I cringe every time I watch them. I mean, but you know that that was another thing about Vicksburg that really stuck out to me is that was right after I did my first trip to Gettysburg, and you know I've never been to a battlefield where I saw as many monuments as I did in Gettysburg. But when I got to Vicksburg, Vicksburg goes hand in hand with Gettysburg on the sheer number of monuments. I mean, they're everywhere and they're so ornate.
Well, I think the
And
veterans had equal, if not more, influence on preserving that battlefield than they did at Gettysburg. I think Vicksburg, the veterans had direct hand in it, even more than Gettysburg's.
they did. And actually, in one of those episodes, one of the park rangers, when we are in the Welcome Center, shows me the original surrender monument. And he
Oh, that's
showed
right.
me he showed me in that monument a piece of a pocket knife that was actually stuck in there by a veteran trying to carve his name into it. And that was probably the coolest thing I took away from Vicksburg was actually seeing that original monument is inside of the museum and they replaced it. with a newer monument. But that was probably the neatest thing I saw in Pittsburgh because it's just that tangible link to the past and link to those veterans.
Yeah, I'm hoping one day I can get out there. But I everybody knows who watches Uncut History. I got like the longest bucket list you've ever seen to man. Like, oh, well, we're gonna go there one day. We're gonna go there one day. And everyone's like, yes, go there. I'm like, well, there's this lovely thing called gas prices.
Yeah, yeah. And see, that's me too. I've got a bucket list a mile long, and that's kind of what led me into doing this travel series. Is you know, I said these are places I've always wanted to see. Why am I not going to see them? So I said, enough is enough. I'm going, and I'm luckily I'm in a position where I travel quite a bit, and I'm able to see places. Virginia City was another really neat place that I read on my channel. That didn't get the response I thought it would, but I mean it's okay because it was neat to me. I had never been out west to like a actual western town where cowboys, thrived, and that was where Mark Twain um, was born. With his writings, and y- being able to see places like that you've always wanted to see is the reward I take away from being able to do this, and it's being able to bring everyone else along with me and maybe get someone interested in it. And I mean, Gettysburg. I had always wanted to go to Gettysburg since I was a kid, and I go to Washington D.C. every year, and it's only an hour ride. So you know, I talked to my wife about it. She said, "Well, let's just go to Gettysburg." So we did, and I thought, it would be years before I could make it back to Gettysburg. Well, I didn't know the next year I'll be going back for the 160th. So I've been able to do all of this stuff, and it's it's a bucket list that's you know never ending. It's shrinking, but it's never ending. France is my big bucket list. I want to go to France. I want to go to Germany. I want to see the World War II battlefields. What I'm really passionate about. I'm passionate about the Civil War, but I'm also passionate about World War II. I love World War II history, and I'm so jealous that JD gets to go over there and see
Yeah.
these cool things. But to see, that's the nice thing about YouTube is, there's not everyone can travel. Not everyone can go see these places for all certain reasons. Some may be handicapped, some may not be able to travel, some may not be able to afford to travel. There's numerous reasons why people can't go. But just like JD's videos, I've never been able to go to France, but I've been able to kind of go through watching his channel. With James with Project Past, I had never been able to go to Antietam until I went back to Gettysburg for last time, but I was able to kind of go to Antietam through watching James's videos. And it's that's the link that YouTube allows, and that's what I like about doing a YouTube channel, is I'm able to maybe give some information, get someone interested in history, and maybe take them along for a journey that they can't go do themselves.
So you've covered World War II, you've covered the American Civil War, but recently you've been wanting to break out and do stuff that really not any channels thus far covered. And that brings us into our most recent content you've been posting, which has predominantly been Revolution. There's been a few other stuff, a lot of cool stuff, by the way. But you've been traveling. First, while you're out in Gettysburg for the 160th, you stopped in to see Valley Forge in Philadelphia. But lately, you've had videos about the Revolution history of Savannah, as well as the hidden history in New York. You had a very big plan for New York, and I know you told me it didn't go quite according to plan. We'll talk about that in a moment. But you've been covering a lot of this Revolutionary War, especially in the South, which is getting me really excited because, in my opinion, that's where the war was won, in the southern theater of the conflict. So it seems like we're getting a lot of stuff that not a lot of history tubers have yet to have the chance to cover. Not that they're not trying to cover it, just haven't had the opportunity yet. So, what brought about these covering of the Revolution, your shift to it?
Well, it started as another rabbit hole, like we were talking about earlier.
It all
And
begins with the
what?
rabbit holes.
And I'm gonna be honest. What started that rabbit hole was JD in the History Underground. He did some videos from Boston and in the New England area, and I love American Revolutionary War history. I have ties to the American Revolution through my family, and that was something I always wanted to explore. Where I live in South Alabama, we have a smidgen of American Revolutionary War history. There's not much. There's a little bit, but no one knows about what is here. So that is another um, feature that will be coming up later on the channel. Uh, with that, so we won't jump into that too much. But it, you know, people. I noticed people were commenting. You know, more American Revolutionary War content, more American Revolution content. And I said, well, everyone associates the American Revolution, like you said earlier, with the Northern campaigns. George Washington, that was the biggest reason. And not, I mean, the Southern campaigns in the American Revolution are almost forgotten about. There were more American Revolutionary War battles in South Carolina and Georgia than in any other theater of operation during the American Revolution. South Carolina had, double digits of Revolutionary War
Yeah.
battles, as well as did North Carolina. And they're just kind of forgotten about. Well, Savannah was perhaps one of the more important American Revolutionary War battles that was just completely forgotten about. And I have been to Savannah, I don't know, 5 or 6 times. And I had, for some reason, never considered shooting an American Revolutionary War series in Savannah until this past year because I said, as I walk around Savannah, there's statues, there's monuments to the American Revolutionary War. There is a little small portion of Spring Hill Redoubt. James from Project Pass had done something from Savannah,
Yes,
and
I really enjoyed. I want to say briefly, I'm very excited. Now we have two videos now from two history tubers about the storming of the Spring Hill Redoubt. We have one from Project Pass and now one from you. So we're all collectively trying to force everybody to look. It's like look at Savannah, look at Savannah. Maybe not
well,
that forceful, but still.
the nice thing about James's channel is he goes really in depth with the actual Battle of Savannah in 1779. So I didn't want to get as in depth because he just did a tremendous job on doing that. So I more or less wanted to talk a little bit about the Savannah actions, talk about the Battle of Savannah, but take you to the other places around Savannah, and that's what I did in that series. And the simple fact of it is, there's not a lot left, honestly. Savannah is really a concrete city over all of this historical land. And it's sad, but I mean, that's the reality of the world we live in is that, you know, building happens, cities go up and these places are erased with that. So, I just finished up Savannah, I think last week on that series. We have now shifted into Charleston. And Charleston is something that I don't know why, but I haven't seen a whole lot of content coming from Charleston concerning the American Revolution. Perhaps one of the most important places during the whole war, and there's not much out there. So I hit some places in Charleston. I didn't get to hit as many as I wanted because there's just such a sheer number of them. And again, Charleston is one of those cities where it's not as bad as Savannah, but the Civil War history has really, really flourished in Charleston, and a lot of the American Revolutionary War history has been erased. But as you go through the city of Charleston, you have all of these old homes there that hold all of this American Revolutionary War history that are just passed by. So, we talk about Benjamin Lincoln a little bit and how he was such an imbecile and he will fall asleep. That's, I mean, and that was one of the things that really intrigued me into the story too was Benjamin Lincoln's character. I mean, he was the overall American colonial general in charge of theater operations there. But they probably chose one of the worst men for the job
Yes.
because he had narcolepsy. And they would be in a meeting talking about tactics, talking about what they're going to do as the British are pressing on the city. And he is sitting in a chair and he is sound asleep. So it's really an intriguing story, and I thought it was one that needed to be brought back to life and needed to have the exposure that it deserves, as it is overshadowed by the Northern Campaign of Operations during the American Revolutionary War.
Well, I mean, I have surprisingly for somebody who's from Pennsylvania, I've most of my interest in Revolution tends to come from the Southern theater. I've always seen that as the key battles. These are the key engagements because Washington was basically sitting on his hands and knees for 2 years around New York, waiting for the British to budge. And it's not necessarily that he wasn't trying to do anything, but he's like, all right, I got the bridge held in New York. Now what? They're not surrendering. I can't make a frontal assault or else I'm going to get massacred, but I can pull out to assist the southern colonies because then the Brits are just going to come back through New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So it was in a
Right.
literal rock and a hard place. But boy, did Cornwallis had a bridge too far moment in South Carolina. He had Charleston. It's the largest surrender of Patriot forces during the war, which puts in when anybody says, "Oh, Valley Forge, the encampment of Valley Forge changed everything." Nope, no, really didn't. There was still a lot of uncertainty. But Cornwallis to Charleston, and then he decides to go into the backcountry, which may just be one of the worst decisions anybody ever made during the Revolution. Like I always said, I think it was a bridge too far. But I don't
Yeah.
want to armchair general on what he should have done, this and that. But you have those key engagements on the Carolina in the Carolina backcountry. Kings Mountain in 1780. One of the few times you can say, yes, the militia definitely were helpful for the United States. I think we have a whole myth of the militia thanks to what happens at Lexington and Concord. More often than not, they were kind of rubbish in the battlefield. But Kings Mountain's one of the few cases where it's militia fighting militia. No, there's nothing else. Then you have Cowpens, where Daniel Morgan finally cracks the code on how you defeat the British Army in the South, to which Nathaniel Greene tries to do on a larger scale, which has mixed results, but ultimately will lead to Cornwallis moving to Yorktown and giving Washington and Rochambeau the opportunity to pin him down. But no Southern theater, you don't have the outcome of the Revolution. I think so much change in that one, basically in the course of a whole, what would you say, 1780, 70, well, yeah, over a year, about a little over than a year. What happens there? The Revolution changes so rapidly. It's one of the theaters I'm always excited about whenever anybody makes content on it. And I'm hoping one day to get down there myself to make content on it. More on that at
You
another
know,
time.
it Charleston and Savannah is, me and Project Pass were actually talking about this, and I have been, it's been an ongoing conversation between us now for a few months. It is just how nice Savannah and Charleston is, but how historic the towns are. There's nowhere you can walk in Savannah and not see something historical, and something that is just really neat. So Savannah is probably one of the most. It's probably one of my favorite towns I've ever been to.
And you have
Um,
Pulaski buried in one of your courtyards. That's just
oh
he's there.
yeah,
He's just there. I did
and,
not know that's where he was buried. I honestly did not.
and it's not just Pulaski. It's also Nathaniel
Yep.
Green. He is buried right there up under the monument, which is something I learned on this last trip to Savannah when I was doing that series. I did not know that. I thought Nathaniel Green was buried somewhere else. Well, I didn't know he's buried right there as a homeless guy was passing by me in a dress. So it it I don't think they do, or I know they don't get the recognition they deserve today. You know, so it was just nice to be able to show my adventure there on exploring the Southern campaign, and maybe get someone else interested, and maybe someone will learn something from it. And then, of course, like you said earlier, we left there and went to upstate New York, switched gears completely. Um, and that upstate New York trip, there was one person in particular that I was really concerned with seeing the place of, and that's because I covered him in the Valley Forge video. And in my opinion, this guy was more important than anyone else in the colonial army during the American Revolution, and he was Baron von Steuben. And ju- he's probably one of the most important figures in military history to this date. And he wasn't even American, he was Prussian. And the reason why was because the tactics that even the military uses now originate from Baron von Steuben. The discipline originates from some of his teachings. And in upstate New York, after the war, he was given a partial land, and that is where he settled. He never married, and that is where he died. And the the trip didn't go exactly as planned, like you said earlier. Um, there were some hiccups. We were going to go to different sites too. We went to the battlefield of Oriskany. We were going to go to Fort Ontario, and inside of Fort Ontario, they had closed for the winter. Apparently, they start closing all of the fortifications there in October, which is just mind-boggling because it was 80 degrees when I was there, and why they closed, I don't know. So, um, but we didn't get to go inside of Fort Ontario. We did go to Fort Ontario. We cover some World War II history from there, and a little bit of American Revolutionary War history. So, upstate New York was more of a dotted trip through different time frames. So we see Oriskany in that series. So you will see that. You will see my attempt to go visit Fort Bull, but Fort Bull, for anyone wanting to see Fort Bull that may be watching this, don't bother. You can't. So I always do a lot of research before I go on these trips, and from everything I saw, Fort Bull was accessible. Well, when I get there, there's no way into Fort Bull. There are no trespassing signs everywhere, and the place is closed. So you can't even get into Fort Bull, which is a very, very famous French and Indian War site, which stinks. It's just another example of historic sites being lost. And but we did get to go to Fort Stanwix, which was really neat. The National Park Service there was probably the most welcoming National Park Service staff I've ever dealt with anywhere I've ever been.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
yeah, they were absolutely great. You know, usually the National Park Service, um, when they see a camera, they get really scared, and they get really scared really fast. Well, they were like, "Hey, come in, do anything you want." I told them I wanted some drone footage. National Park Service, it is illegal to fly drones over the National Park Service property without written authorization. Well, they're in. Hopefully, this don't get me in any trouble for saying this, but their words to me was, "As long as you're not in National Park Service boundaries, feel free to fly." So I literally went to a 0.00 line on my GPS for flight, so I wouldn't break the National Park Service law, and I was able to get footage of Fort Stanwix. So that's obviously nice when you can incorporate an overhead shot of the area that you're looking at to give you a better idea of what you're seeing. And it was just New York was probably the most awesome place I have visited to date yet on this channel. And it was a lot of fun. So you'll see a lot of different things on this series, but not everything went according to plan, and that's obviously what happens with any YouTuber. You know, JD goes through it, James goes through that.
Yeah,
Not
I remember years. It was when JD was starting out. He wanted to go see the national park site for the Tuskegee Airmen. Called and everything. Gets there, not open. And
yeah.
he's like,
Yeah.
"Dang dung."
Well, I mean, that's just Alabama for you, to be honest with you. So it's like that in a lot of places. There are sites here that won't even allow a camera in. I mean, without jumping through 17 hoops to do so. Um, so you have sites like that, and they're all over the country. They're not just here in Alabama. They're everywhere. And it's unfortunate, but it. You always run into those troubles. That's just one of the things about doing this is that everything doesn't work out the way it always is planned. And to me, it just adds in more on the adventure. Um, Very von Steuben, and man, I hope this doesn't get me in trouble. I really don't. I'll read it out. But like I said, when I was in upstate New York on this trip, everything was closed for the winter. Everything was shutting down. I had come all the way up there to see one of my main things I wanted to see was Baron von Steuben's home place and see his grave. Well, they were closed for the winter, and they had closed a week before I got there. I drove 45 minutes twice to try to get into the site. And there was just a simple gate up, no fence around the site, just a gate over the driveway. So I said, you know what? What's the harm of me just walking down and seeing his grave real quick and doing a quick filming? So I took the chance and I did. And hopefully, no one had a problem with it. And they won't see the episode when it airs and, slap me with a fine or something. But, sometimes you got to take the chance, like those, some of these other YouTube channels do, I guess. But it was definitely worth it because it was the most beautiful time of the year to visit, his grave. And when you see the episode, and I can't wait for everyone to see the episode. When you walk in, all the trees are yellow and red, and the sun is just beaming down on his grave just right on his monument. And it literally was the most peaceful and serene place that is a burial to a general that I've ever been in my entire life. It was the most beautiful sight for a grave I have ever seen. And, it was, you can see why he wanted to be just kind of left alone there.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to. I've seen photographs of the house, but I've never really seen any images of the grave itself. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing where he ultimately was buried.
Yeah, unfortunately, with it being closed, we couldn't go into the house. You will see the house from the outside, but my main thing was, showing his resting place and talking a little bit about what he did during the war, his contribute, what he contributed at Valley Forge and outside of Valley Forge, into modern military today, because not a lot of people realize who Baron von Steuben even was, and that's the cool things about doing this is you're able to talk to people like you and all JD and James and all these other history YouTubers. We're all history nerds. We're all students of history. We're one small community, honestly, and we're here for the same reasons. So it's nice to kind of contribute to this community, and bring in more people because in reality, we're all teaching history and sharing our love and passions.
That's what we're trying to do. I think we were all crazy. No, that sounds it's not the best way to say it, but we're all a little crazy, and we all try to preserve our own little corners of history. Now, before we conclude, I gotta ask if money was immaterial, which it almost is in 2023, but that's a story for another day. If money was almost immaterial and you could do anything with the channel, what is your dream project? What you would want to end? Like, is there a certain place you want to go no matter what? A certain type of video you want to make? What is the dream project? One of your dream projects? There's millions.
That is actually a really simple question, as complex as it sounds. Um, Omaha Beach. I know JD's did it. I know there's other tons of YouTubers that did it, but it's the number one place I want to see. And that that place in itself, you're not only getting the view of Omaha Beach and the history, but more importantly, you're getting the emotions. So that would be my dream place to go is Omaha Beach and be able to relay my emotions to everyone else, and visiting that place for the first time.
Now, before I finish up completely, I gotta ask you: you gonna try again to do the trench live stream?
Oh, let's
I had to bring it up. It was a great stream, minus the rain and the internet and the dirt and
it yes, that is something that is in the works. I've been thinking about, and I'm gonna be honest, I had all kinds of plans when I started doing that. But once you're sitting there, you've made a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, and ate some food, you're just like, okay, what now?
now
But
what?
yes, that was my attempt at doing a history secrets video. And I've really got to have some friends to do that with. I've got to talk some people into doing that with me, so I'm not just sitting there like a buffoon running out of things to talk about. But yeah, I mean that is in the works. We're gonna do another one of those, another attempt at it, and we're gonna do it from a GI perspective this time.
That'll be cool.
And yeah, and maybe do something a little bit better. I would love to do that during the January event. But unfortunately, it probably will not be live because just for the simple fact there's no internet service there. So oh gosh, yeah, that cringe video there.
Hey, if it makes you feel good, it is still one of my most favorite content you ever did. It was an entertaining moment. I will not deny that.
I do some of the humor stuff on just to add in some humor to it. I mean, it's good to loosen up every once in a while, not take everything so seriously, because all in all, when you get down to the history travel and the reenacting, there's one thing associated with it. It's fun. It's fun. You can't take everything too seriously.
No.
This is what we love. This is what we enjoy. Have fun with it.
That's
You know,
why if you've ever noticed, there's a thing called trip tapes on the channel. And I don't think a lot of
yeah,
people in my audience fully know what it is. What it is essentially to show you when we go out and make these, we're having fun. We're not over here being like stuffy, like going for, like, and just over here. No, we are having the time of our lives or as best we can when the weather doesn't cooperate. So that's why I put that together just to show that all of us that make these videos is like, oh, we're having fun. We are humorous. We're not, just stuffy people when we say historians. Historian, I think, sometimes can carry a bad title, a bad image. Everybody thinks we're a bunch of stuffy people for, I guess you want to say, our tobacco pipe. And, oh, this is what happened. No, we're very goofy.
well, I mean, if you go back and watch some of my reenactment videos, you'll see that you watch other reenactments, and I think sometimes like World War Wisdom, those guys, I love them. They're some of my favorite to watch. I binge watch reenactment videos from those guys, but they're too serious all the time. I mean, the simple gist of it is, if you go back and watch some of my content, it's a little farby sometimes and a little bit cringy, but you know what? That's the behind the scenes of the hobby. That is the fun that we have, at these events. We joke with one another, we mess with one another, and we have fun with it. And it's not all serious all the time, because back then the real deal, the guys had to have a sense of humor to get through it. So
Yeah.
we do the same.
Yeah, no, you read from any time period, you're going to end up going for historical record. You're going to find humor. You're going to see, they're going to go down
Yeah.
like, look, this is what it's like. This is life now. And we've adjusted, not wholly, but we've tried to adjust best we can. And now we enjoy the little things in the world. All right. Well, as we finish up, I just want to ask you again, where can people find you? So, of course, we have the YouTube channel, but where can people find you?
I'm on Instagram, History Saver 1941 on Instagram, and also on TikTok, History Saver 1941 YouTube on TikTok. And as far as Twitter and X, well, I don't have Twitter or X yet, or whatever it is now. It
We
keeps
call
changing
Twix.
names.
We call it Twix around here.
Twits, that sounds about right. I'm gonna have to start using that analogy.
It's Twix.
Yeah, Twits. It doesn't know what it is. But yeah, I'm not on Twitter, but you can find me on Instagram and on TikTok. There's no Patreon or anything like that yet. Maybe in the future, but who knows. But YouTube is the main place. I guess you can find all of the content, and yeah, it it's fun. It's a lot of fun, and man, I can't thank you enough for having me on. Your channel is one of my favorites to watch as well. I'm a
Oh,
big
thank you for
fan.
saying that, because I'm always horrified looking at my content once I make it.
No. The thing that I like about your content is, like we were just talking about, it's not too serious. You get the historical gist, but there's always a laugh in between, and it keeps you entertained. It keeps you interested, and man, I love that. It's a great channel, and I love watching everything you do.
Well, thank you for coming on tonight. Yes, I'm thanking you for being attached to fly paper. You're thinking, why is he thanking me for being held against the will of the fly paper? Is he gonna let me go? How's that work? Well, in all honesty, thank you for coming on. It's been a blast having you. Hopefully, sometime in the future we can have you back on. I'm hoping to be irregularly bringing guests on, like from time to time, just to touch base, see how everything's doing. But with that out of the way, those that are watching, you know what you got to do. If you have not supported History Savior 1941 yet, go to the link in the description below, or if you're watching live in the chat like now, and you can subscribe to his channel. If you've not supported myself yet, well, subscribe to Readout Productions, because we do weekly live streams like this. My end goal is to have Uncut History be weekly guests, different historians, authors, YouTubers, things like that, so we can promote all the different people that are trying to preserve history, because everybody has a different interest and have a different way on how they contribute to historical preservation. So be sure to support History Savior 1941. I'd appreciate if you would support myself here at Readout Productions. And with that, we're gonna play the music. It's playing. This is the after party. We put the screen on and we listen to the music. YouTube's YouTube appropriate when Johnny comes marching home. I really wish I could get like John Brown's body, but we'll do what we can do for now. They have Battle Hymn of the Republic, but I want the chorus for John Brown's body. So So, well, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Uncut History.